So good morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We are so excited to be with you here today. And I see so many people that I know and new people that I can't wait to get to know. So we're just grateful that you've decided to join us. My name is Tanya Spilavoy. I work for the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education in the Department of Technology. So it's called WCET, which is the WICHE Cooperative for Educational Technologies. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this amazing collaboration among the 4 regional compacts. And then our individual compact leaders will talk about their part in the collaboration. So for some reason, there we go. All right. So first of all, what is a regional compact? You can see on this map that there are 4 regions in the United States. They're divided into state boundaries. In the center of the map, you'll see that North Dakota and South Dakota are crosshatched orange because they are members of both the Midwestern Higher Education Compact in yellow and the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education in red. You'll see a large portion of the United States belongs to the Southern Regional Education Board, and then you can see NEBI working in the New England region. So all 4 of these regional compacts have contacts in all of the states around the United States, and even states who may not be officially part of a compact work with compacts to reduce the cost of higher education, increase access, and in many ways really have been working for a long time on scaling equity for higher education students. And they do that by bringing together people in the field who work at institutions. There are policymakers from different levels of government. So there might be SHEO officers, like state higher education executive officers. We also have legislators that are involved. And so a lot of policy and implementation and research and best practice goes into the work that happens in the different regions. You might not even know that this is all going on because it kind of happens in the ecosystem. And a lot of the policy that's developed around the regional compacts gets funneled through states. And then states and institutions and their systems adopt those practices, and it's scaled across the nation sort of seamlessly, that they work together in the background, making sure that everything collaborates together for the best practice of students. So if you look right here, one of the things that we are doing is so I work with open educational resources, and it just made sense that the regional compacts could get involved. They're a wonderful and collaborative group of people, and some of the ways that we've contributed to the OER space is collaborating, contributing through collaboration and capacity. So one of the things we noticed, or that I noticed when I first came to the OER space, is that folks were doing things in all of these wonderful ways around the country. So this awesome work would be happening in an institution or in a system, and 5 people knew about it, but not everybody knew about it. And I always thought, well, there has to be a better way of sharing best practice, getting everybody involved, and not duplicating effort. Because what I noticed when I first came to the OER space is that we'd all start from zero, trying to learn what to do next. Or maybe you'd have a contact in a place and you'd call this OER champion and say, hey, how did you do that? And then you start doing it. But there was no way to really teach everyone how to do best practice. And so we recognized that all of this amazing innovation was happening in OER on the ground. There's a rich ecosystem of OER champions doing outstanding work for students, and we were interested in just bringing everybody together and sharing all of that great knowledge. So one of the first things we did was, I mean, this is a sad picture. In fact, it happened last March in Atlanta, right as COVID was hitting the nation. We brought together people from all of the compacts, K-12, higher ed, the OER community, different organizations, to really decide how we could share and scale OER at a national scale. And you might see some of the people in the photos, and then also they were some people couldn't make it because of COVID and they were online. It was quite a day. Since then, we have developed a regional compact, an OER initiative, and each of the regional compacts focuses on one aspect of research and collaboration. So the Midwestern Higher Education Compact is focused on cost savings, dual enrollment, and career and technical education. WICHE is really focused on equity and the minority serving institutions in our region, especially tribal colleges. The New England Board of Higher Education is really focused on evidence-based teaching and learning practices, including open pedagogy. And then the Southern Regional Education Board is focused on dual enrollment because they have a very high K-12 focus, career and technical education, and the minority serving institutions, especially the HBCUs in the SREB region. And WCET, where I sit, I'm kind of like the connector among all of the regions. We get together, we share best practice, and I keep everybody kind of as a group, and it's really been fun. One of the ways that I contributed in the past year was this report with Jeff Seaman and Nate Ralph at Bayview Analytics. I really wanted to know what impact OER initiatives were having on faculty selection, because we know that there's a lot of activity going around, but how does it actually move the dial so that we're impacting students, right? And what we found in this study was that regardless of the initiative or where it was, if it was in an institution, if it was in a department, if it was at the system level or at the state collaboration level, everything we do in OER is making a difference. So I just wanted to give you all a huge shout out today for all the amazing work that you're doing, because you are making a difference and the research shows it. So when we asked faculty, how did you hear about OER? When there was an initiative happening in your region or your institution, did it help you consider OER? And they all said yes. So keep doing that. And I just want to applaud you for all the great work you're doing, because you are making a difference. So some of the ways that the regional compacts have been contributing is we get people together, and this is one of the first places we got together. This was in Chicago, and you can see the representatives from all of the Midwestern higher education states holding their state reps, right? So this was the first time that everybody in the Midwestern higher education compact region got together in a room and said, hey, this is what we're doing with OER, or hey, this is what we don't do with OER, can you help us? And so we plan on doing more of this kind of sharing, whether it's virtually or in person. So I want to pass the baton on to my lovely coworker, Charlotte Daly, who is leading the charge in the Southern region. And we're so happy to have you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Tanya. Hello, everyone. I am Charlotte Daly, Program Specialist for Open Educational Resources for the Southern Regional Education Board. I am very excited about this opportunity to work in the OER space and to lead the charge for the SREB in this effort along with the other compacts. Next slide, please. The Southern region consists of 16 states. I won't name them all here, but I've listed them for you and given you a visual picture of the region in which we work. We have active participation from all of our states, and I am here to raise awareness with the focus of the Hewlett funding to raise awareness of OER, dual enrollment, CTE, and our work with the HBCUs and MSIs. Next slide. As SREB's strengths include research, data, publications, and convening of stakeholders to increase communication and collaboration across the region, here's a brief listing of the activities that we are undertaking on behalf of the Hewlett funding, along with the other compacts. SREB's focus are to develop and disseminate a survey to identify current OER and dual enrollment activity in our states, conduct webinar series for policymakers, educators, and practitioners on OER and dual enrollment, Initiating conversations and networking with HBCUs and MSIs to explore equity, challenges, college readiness, and access OER adoption materials. To raise awareness of OER and dual enrollment by coordinating with SREB states to create a contact list and improve communication. Host a regional conference for OER and dual enrollment leaders to increase awareness and share policies. And finally, to develop publications along trending OER topics. Where we are with these activities right now, the development and dissemination of the initial survey to identify current practices of OER and dual enrollment. That survey went out in mid-June, and we have preliminary results. As you can see on the middle section here, we have some preliminary results. 26 survey respondents, 13 of our states represented in the response. And from the questions asked, 7 states who responded required dual enrollment in all public high schools. 9 states reported the use of OER and dual enrollment, and 22 of the respondents believe that OER and dual enrollment increases equity and access to post-secondary education. The final report will be published later on in the next couple of months. Conducting a webinar series, our webinar series kicked off July 28th. And if you'll look over to the right of this slide, the webinar series will continue next week with the cost of OER and return on investment. And our series webinar session, will begin at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And our presenters for next week will be Dr. Tanya Spilavoy and Dr. Jerry Hanley. So please join us if you can. Registration information is at the bottom here. Our final session in this webinar series is making the case for student success, where we will talk with practitioners in the field of dual enrollment and CTE on the K-12 side, as well as talking with someone who is in the middle, bringing the students over from K-12 and having them successfully matriculate into the collegiate field. We also would have a person who talks to the faculty to encourage faculty buy-in on how to actually build the OER from other documents. To initiate conversations and networking with HBCUs and MSIs to explore equity challenges, we have an active HBCU collaborative, which we meet about quarterly. And we're getting ready. We had a meeting, I believe, in June. We're getting ready for the next meeting in September. So the hosting of a regional conference for OER and dual enrollment leaders. This conference is, we're planning it now with the funding. It has to take place before the end of the funding period, which is April 2022. So look for advertisements and promotions about this conference very soon in the next 30 days. And we're targeting February, late February for the dates for the conference. Developing publications along trending OER topics. As I said before, at the SREB publication on the initial results from the survey will be forthcoming in the next 30 days or so. And also an OER blog or vlog series is in the works for us to continue our work. Please visit, next slide, please. Visit us at www.sreb.org. And we are transitioning more of our OER work to easy access from our front and cover page. Thank you very much. Back to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Charlotte. Next, we'll hear from Liliana Diaz from the OER West Network at WICHE.
Hi, everyone. So I'm really loving how we're doing, like, back to you, Tanya. I feel like a news anchor. So I love that in my morning segments here. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Liliana Diaz, and I'm a policy analyst at the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. And you can see we cover the western half of the United States, including some affiliated territories and freely associated states, which include Guam, Mariana Islands, and then as of July 1st, the Federated States of Micronesia. So the WICHE region is expanding, and we're hoping we can support our colleagues in the Pacific as well. So our work is actually relatively new. The OER world and all the work, amazing work that folks have been doing in the West has been occurring for a long time. But as far as kind of getting together all of these folks in the western half of the United States to come together and talk about what they're doing, their successes, their challenges is relatively new. So I'm very excited to be leading this work. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see kind of some of our main activities that we're focusing on here at WICHE in regards to open education and OER. So of course, our main goal here is to increase cross-collaboration among states, systems, and institutions in the WICHE region, all in the hopes of growing and scaling OER among states in the West. And we have a special focus on equity. And so we believe that equity is an essential characteristic that needs to be embedded in all facets of OER, whether it's policy, whether it's practice, whether it's research. So that's something that we always have salient in all of our conversations. The WICHE region is very diverse. So we have rural, suburban, urban, and frontier communities, and of course, some of our Pacific colleagues as well. And then we also have very diverse institutional types. So we have tribal colleges and universities, we have Hispanic serving institutions, we have Anapizis of Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institutions. So kind of a big collection of minority serving institutions that we're trying to figure out how can we serve best and how can we serve better through the use of open education and open educational resources. Another focus of our work is to really identify how we can conduct assessment and evaluation of our OER activities. So in the WICHE region, we focus a lot on the policy space, understanding that for OER to be advanced or scaled more broadly, we really do have to engage conversations with practitioners and state level leadership to really support OER, whether financially or through other processes. But to have that be really informed by the folks that are actually doing the work on the ground. So, in the policy space, sometimes there can be a disconnect between kind of what policymakers are doing and what practitioners are doing. And so we're really focusing on making sure that we can bridge that communication and really have a solid foundation of support that's evidence-based, practice-based, and informed by those actually conducting the work for OER and open education on our campuses. And then a lot of our collaboration right now with the folks that are in the network, we have about close to almost 40 individuals that come together every month to really talk about what's happening in their states, what's happening in their systems, institutions. And we really do this because some of our states are light years ahead in OER and open education, while others are just getting started. And we found that cross-pollination, cross-collaboration can really help some states move forward or really crowdsource solutions for some of the challenges that they're facing. So if we go on to the next slide, you will see 5 areas, or what we're calling working areas. So before we launched the network, I actually reached out to key individuals in each of our states in the WICHE region and kind of had a discussion or conversation as to what are some of the pain points, some of the areas that they really need support with, some of the areas that they're doing really well in. And we identified kind of 5 bucket areas that a lot of folks are hoping to kind of expand their OER work. So they are data and research, state level coordination, strategic communication, funding and sustainability, and technology. And so we are focusing right now on data and research as a network, partly because folks are busy and we understand that there's a lot of work in OER to be done, but we want to make sure that whatever we work on, we do it well. So right now, as a network, we're focusing on data and research and identifying what really could solidify that narrative that OER is incredibly impactful for students. And so as a network, we've actually identified a potential, or not potential, but we're moving forward with research on time to completion for students that have taken or are in open educational resource courses that utilize OER. So we're hoping to launch that research in collaboration with other organizations to really demonstrate whether or not OER moves students forward to completion faster if they're in OER or zero cost degrees. If we move on to the next slide, I like to highlight a lot of the work that's already happening and the successes that some of our states have had, which include recognition and support for OER. We have several states that have really solidified the importance of OER among their state legislatures and received appropriations for that, including Colorado, Idaho, which just received $1 million appropriations from their state, and California, which you've all heard was a big financial support. And then there was another one that I am blanking out, Oregon. And so these states have really solidified that financial support for OER. And so we're hoping to support other states to be able to convey that narrative to their legislatures to increase support for OER. Some of the other successes have been structured faculty support through professional development and grants for the development and review of OER. So several of our states provide grant funding to their faculty to engage in this work because it's important to compensate faculty for their time and encourage more of support for OER. And some of our states have done an excellent job at course marking or highlighting OER, so it's easily found by students during the registration process. I always like to highlight Hawaii. They've done a fantastic job with course labeling, course marking, Oregon being another. And so definitely some models that can be replicated across other states, which are exemplary. State level support, as I mentioned, some of the states before, Colorado, Oregon, Idaho, and Colorado, for advancing no cost, low cost materials. And then development of student and faculty surveys. So most of our states do some sort of assessment or evaluation among their faculty and their students on their interactions with OER. And as Tanya kind of shared at the beginning of our presentation, the work that you're doing is impactful, not just among students, but also faculty. And then of course, expanding that collaboration among faculty and staff, departments, institutions, systems, and state agencies. So really bridging that communication across all facets of higher education. So if you need to get a hold of me, the next slide has my contact information. And then I will pass the baton back to Tanya to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, up next is Lindsay Gum. She's from the New England Board of Higher Education, and we're so excited to hear about the work that's being done in New England.
Thanks, Tanya. Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Gum. I use she, her pronouns. And as Tanya just mentioned, I am with the New England Board of Higher Education. We call ourselves NEBI. So if you hear me say that throughout my presentation, that's what I'm referring to. The other one is quite the mouthful. It's a little pretentious also. So I just wanted to say that, every time I hear my colleagues across the regions discuss the work they're doing, it makes me really excited because that's what the compacts are doing. We're working together, going back to what Tanya said to, we don't want to duplicate efforts, and everyone is focusing on something so completely different, yet so important. So just hearing Charlotte talk about dual enrollment is so exciting to me because I know my institution specifically, we have a lot of dual enrollment programs and our students struggle to buy those textbooks. So that's really important work. Liliana in the West working on equity. We're watching her very closely because we are excited to learn from WICHE and hopefully copy some of their best practices. And as Tanya mentioned, in our region, we are focusing on teaching and learning. Next slide, please. And to give you a little bit of an insight into why we honed in on that area. So in New England, we have, or NEBI supports over 270 colleges and universities in our 6 states. And those states are Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And of those 270, 61% are independent or private institutions. And that's really unique to our region. So we've been keen on investigating ways to help bridge the gaps between our public and private sectors in this open education space. And one way that we're doing this is by taking a closer look at the teaching and learning benefits with OER for increasing student success, which we at NEBI know from working with our legislators and our senior leadership that at public institutions, that gets their attention, but it really gets their attention at private institutions when they hear teaching and learning. Next slide, please. So for our Hewlett grant that we're working on now, we are again focusing on teaching and learning, but we are particularly interested in helping our faculty in our region who have maybe used OER in their classrooms before. You know, maybe they've adopted a textbook or they've used resources that they've linked in their LMS, but that's kind of as adventurous as they've gotten. We want to help them take the next step on inviting their students into the OER creation process. And we're really keen on looking at how OER can help extend pedagogical flexibility for our faculty, but also when our students get involved in the process, how it can help them diversify their own curriculum to make it more affirmative of their own culture. And we want to look at how students who participate in those processes of open pedagogy or OER-enabled pedagogy, how it might impact the student experience and learning, and hopefully how it may lead to close equity gaps. And finally, we hope to do some research, or we are going to do some research on students who are participating in this right now. So we are working with a research consultant to survey students in our region who are involved in this work in the fall. And then we're hoping in the spring to hold an academic senior leadership summit where we can share these results and really show to leadership that, hey, the work that we're doing and that these faculty and students are doing really has a huge impact on the student success rate. Next slide, please. And to do this work, to kind of spearhead the process of getting access to students who are doing this work, we developed a faculty community of practice. It has representation from not only the 6 New England states, but also New York and New Jersey. They're not officially part of our compact, but we do tend to include them quite often, especially in the open education space. So we have a faculty community of practice, which is made up of 8 different faculty members from the 8 states. They all teach in different disciplines. They are at private institutions, public institutions, community colleges, and it's a really great group of faculty. And what we're doing, we've brought these folks together to kind of refresh their fundamental knowledge of OER and to work towards a deeper understanding of how utilizing open educational practices to increase student engagement and ownership of their cultural content present in their learning materials really is kind of the next step. And we want to show them how to do that. So to help kind of educate this group, starting in the spring, we had bi-weekly meetings and we all met together. We hosted webinars to help them learn about how to best support students through this process, because we really wanted to make this kind of a student-centered experience, and faculty were interested and wanted to know how to do that, but they really, didn't know where to start. So we've helped them kind of identify key players on their own campuses so that when the community of practice ends, they can kind of keep this going and sustain it. And we're looking at creating a proof of concept so that we can kind of replicate this model. And I just highlighted 2 of our current faculty members. And we will be giving a faculty panel at Open Ed 21, so look out for that. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we put on some webinars to help these faculty members learn the best practices of guiding their students through open pedagogy, but we also wanted to make it open to everyone. So we did. So I hope some of you on the call may have been able to attend some of our webinars. And so I facilitated 3 different webinars in this spring 2021, and our guest speakers and panelists highlighted how to support students. They highlighted faculty perspectives and the importance of centering social justice and racial justice in this work. And some of our featured speakers included Jasmine Roberts-Cruz, Robin DeRosa, Heather Maselli, Jennifer Van Allen, Steele Wagstaff, Will Cross, Stacy Katz, and Hannah Davidson. And I'm going to pop into the chat a link to the page where all of our recordings are listed. They are all openly licensed, and we hope you share them. And we have a lot of other resources on this page meant to support our practitioners in our space, because we have a regional advisory committee made up of practitioners, academic leadership, legislators, and they all really said that's something that was needed, a place where practitioners could go to get information, professional development, talking points that they could bring back to campus. So if you have any feedback on this page or you'd like to see something listed, we would love to hear from you. And that is about all I have. Back to you, Tanya.
First of all, before we move on to our next speaker, I want to give a huge shout out to Hillary Baribeau, who is live tweeting right now all kinds of resources and sharing this session on Twitter because I keep getting tagged. And so if you all are interested, make sure you're following the hashtag that goes with the summit. And you can also follow the speakers here and the different OER regional Twitter accounts. But thanks, Hillary, you're doing a great job representing this particular webcast. We're really excited about it. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Annika, and Annika represents the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, and we're so excited to hear all the things that she's doing today. Jenny Parks couldn't be with us, but Jenny is also a highly energetic part of that team and really the energy behind the OER inception in the Midwestern Higher Education Compact region. Most of you probably know her or work with her. And so we're just grateful to be here with the Michigan Summit because you're part of MEC, and MEC is part of this larger collaboration. So we're all actually friends and working together. Okay, take it away, Annika.
Thanks, Tanya. You just took some of my talking points. I was going to thank Michigan as one of our states we've been working very closely with to organize the summit today. MEC is sponsoring the summit, and I'm sure you've seen that around. So thank you, Michigan, for having us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different activities that MEC is doing and how we've organized our work through the Hewlett Grant. So Tanya, next slide. The primary way that we've organized our work is by activating OER state action teams in each state. MEC represents 12 states in the Midwest, including Michigan, yay. Each state has an OER action team that includes representatives from the public universities, the university systems, boards of regents, higher education, community colleges, K-12, our independent colleges, and also some state government representatives. So trying to bring all the people across the state together to work on OER and what Open can do for their various states, and to just move each state forward. So every state in the Midwest is in a different place with open education, and we're just trying to provide the support and resources to move each state along their pathway to using open education in whatever way they see fits their state priorities. So these action teams, we meet quarterly. We help develop some plans and strategies together. We share strategic plans from across the different states. And we really try to facilitate connections between states whenever possible, as well as with other national organizations like this consortia, OEN, Spark, Doers, CCC, OER, all the different organizations are trying to bring everybody in to help support the work at the state level. So I'm going to go through a couple of specific activities that we've been up to in the last year. So next slide, Tanya, please. So our first thing is what we're doing today. We've been supporting OER statewide summits in 6 states, actually. We held our first one in Missouri during Open Education Week in March. Today we are here, and yesterday in Michigan. And then in the spring, next spring, we'll be looking at Kansas, with Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. So I'll have lots more great virtual summits for folks to attend. So I hope you keep an eye out for information about those. We also have been working with OEN, the Open Education Network, to develop a leadership training for state leadership. That training is really targeted at the upper echelon, if you will, of academic leadership in the state. So looking at presidents, provosts, deans, directors, and really helping them get a sense of why OER should matter, what are some of the resources that are out there, how can open education help further your strategic goals at your institution or your system. And 3 of our states are hosting those kinds of seminars for their senior leaders, Indiana, Illinois, and the bottom one should say North Dakota. And then for a couple of states are just getting started on their OER journey. So we've been joining OEN as members, as statewide members, to be able to access the open textbook library, to get access to their faculty development, leadership development. It's a great organization to bring folks into the community for the first time. And then in Ohio, who's had years of summits and leadership training and other things are sort of farther down the line. We're working really closely with them to develop sort of a customized faculty support model that could serve as a pilot for our future direct to faculty sort of grant model going forward. Next slide, Tanya. One of the other activities that we've been focused on, MEC is known, I think, across the region as helping with cost savings, especially around technology. So we put together an OER IT technology working group in January. We had a great brainstorming session. This is like the output of that brainstorming. It's all these sticky notes about what are some of the challenges that we face in the community when we're trying to use OER, open education, and the intersection between that and all of our technology systems. So our LMS, our publishing tools and authoring tools, classroom tools like Hypothesis and other tools that we use in the classroom, homework platforms. How does all of that stuff work together? So we've been meeting as a group and just talking through those challenges, trying to understand the landscape, seeing if maybe there's an opportunity to do sort of an RFP or something to support a discount across the regions. And what we sort of come out on is that we need more information. The landscape is complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's very new still. A lot of the products and services that are out there have only been in existence for a few years. They're still growing and learning. So we're together exploring the different tools that are on the market, and we've been having a series of working group meetings. We had Pressbooks and LibreText come to a meeting in June, Manifold and CBOX Open Lab in July, and then in September we'll be digging into open source tools for math like MathJax, Pretext, WebWork, MyOpenMath, and then tools for interactivity, H5P, Hypothesis, and other tools that can actually be used in the classroom pedagogically. So we're really spending some time with each of these tools, getting to know them, thinking about how they might integrate or not with what we're already doing in our classrooms, and just helping everyone understand better the landscape of open source publishing and authoring tools. Next slide. Another key piece of our research project is to look at the cost savings that come along with OER and also the return on investment. So we've engaged an external researcher to lead a working group on OER cost savings and ROI, which several of our compact members are on as well. And we're really looking at trying to create a consistent way to report on and describe the cost savings and return on investment, so that when we all are out there advocating for OER, we're sort of using some of the same terms. We're calculating our cost savings and return on investment in similar ways that can be compared across states or nationally. So these are just some of the questions that we're exploring. What are some best practices out there? What's the difference between cost savings and return on investment? What are the other benefits besides cost savings, and how do we report on those things? What's the timeline for those things, and how do we account for non-monetary costs and returns? So all of the complicated things that go into doing the work of open education. And next slide. And then another project that we embarked on is around career and technical education. We've been partnering with the Rebus Textbook Success Program, which is an awesome program. to identify 3 projects across the Midwest that are focused in sort of the career technical area and also focused on supporting incarcerated students. So we've given them the opportunity, these 3 projects on the screen here, to go through the Rebus Textbook Success Program and to explore the publishing process. So one group's working on welding, another group is working on nursing and informatics, and a third group is working on English in the Odyssey Beyond Bars program, which is a program for incarcerated students. I think we might have lost the slides. Did we lose Tanya?
I'm here. I got kicked out of Zoom for a second and I'm back.
Okay, no worries.
We're going to leave a little bit of room for questions. So I want to make sure that we're ready to do that. Stacy, do we have time for the participants to ask questions?
You have about, well, you have till 1:05, so you have about 8, but there are no questions that have come in. So I don't know if anybody would like to speak up and ask their questions, because no
And I'll get
questions.
back
have
to
come
the
into
share
chat.
screen. Go ahead, Annika, if you're, I'll get the screen up for you. Annika, unmute.
I muted again. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you wanted to split, there was one more slide. I just wanted to mention, we did just recently sign a contract with Creative Commons. You may have seen some of that stuff in our newsletter. We are able to offer, Creative Commons has given us the opportunity to offer a 15% discount for all of their professional learning opportunities, including their really great certificate programs, their CC certificates for educators and librarians. So if you can visit the website, I put the link in the chat. And we'll also be working in the next through the fall and spring with SREB on their outreach and support for MSIs and HBCUs. So that, I think, is everything that was on our slides. Thank you, Tanya, and everybody. And please come to the MEC website and see the webinars and things that we have going on in the future.
I just want to say thank you so much to every presenter today and to everyone who is here from the Michigan Summit. This presentation is proof that when lots of people get together to share ideas, to work together, to collaborate and learn from each other, that great things can happen. And we just want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who is working hard every day to make things better for students and a better future for everybody. So thank you for all your openness and sharing and caring in the space. If you have any questions, I will mute and we'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, please go to the individual websites and don't hesitate to reach out because we love to share.
So if you'd like to stop sharing your screen and we can see each other's, who are the people who have their cameras on anyway. Does anybody have any questions? And it's like I said, none came up in the. All I know is I have a lot of reading to do, I think. Lots of webinars to watch. I'll ask a question. The CERB webinars that you're talking about, are those recorded as well and available? I noticed that the one of the other regionals had their that they're available to watch.
SREB.
Yes,
Yes.
I said it wrong.
That's okay. Yes, the SREB webinars, they're specifically OER webinar series. They are up and they're also published. They're also published to YouTube as well. But they are available on our website. If you go to the main page, the cover of the homepage, go over to events and then select webinars, you will see past webinars to view.
Thank you. And I'm going to type in here, save the chat if you want. If you're attending the session and you want to save the chat, you can save the chat so you have all these great links. If you haven't already opened them and bookmarked them or saved them somewhere before the session ends. So, does anybody else have any other questions? Like I said, I'll ask more if nobody else has any. I don't see any coming in. For Witchy, you said you have, I was looking at your working on an area of the strategic communications, both internal and external for the strategies. This is something you're working on. Is this something that you've gotten?
Mhm.
Are you planning on sharing those communication strategies with everyone?
Yeah,
I'm thinking that
so-
could be really valuable.
Yeah, so a document that I'm working on finalizing is how to bridge the conversations between practitioners and state level leaders. So these would be legislators and maybe the SHIO offices. So it has kind of recommendations for how to bridge that conversation, how to position your institutions and your systems to have those conversations with policymakers. So it does actually create and provide a framework that folks can utilize. And so that I'm hoping will be released later this fall.
Great. That's great, because I think that's one of the hardest things for people to get started with is, and there's different conversations that we need to have at different points in our, in the work that we're doing. So having different.
And there's a question in the chat that I can definitely
Came
speak
up.
to. What is the best way for individuals to support larger policy initiatives?
Question.
And I mean, others can jump in, but at least from an institutional point, I think that one of the things that I've noticed is that there is usually no tie-in between OER open education to the institution's strategic goals. So that could be one way to really support larger policy initiatives to really embed OER and open education, is to tie in how OER or open education can fulfill some of the institutions or the systems strategic goals and priorities. And then that can definitely carry on support for OER long-term as well. And I don't know if there's others that might want to jump in to respond to that particular question.
And so sometimes in those strategic plans, the word OER might not be part of that strategic plan, but you can find ways to match OER with their goals, such as workforce, attainment goals, retention goals, graduation rates, working with racially marginalized or minoritized students. And so you can find ways to say, hey, here's a great study that meets that goal in your strategic plan, and it has to do with OER. And those are some of the ways we try to bring the policymakers who have an idea in mind, but they don't know how to get it done, and you know how to get it done. So show them the way.
I will say we had great success at Ferris when we had the head of the diversity office realize the significance and impact. So on the students that they're serving. And so I know our diversity office has their own strategic plan. So that's one of the things we tried to tap into too, was how we tied in with their strategic plan and how we could help them achieve that. So that's a great idea. We have about 1 more minute. If anybody has any other questions, comments. I am interested in checking out the course labeling too and marking. That's something we talk about all the time. Oh, and Hillary just sent us to a great example. Looks like maybe in Canada. So wonderful. Okay. Well, I want to thank all of the presenters. Really interesting, took lots of notes, like I said, lots of reading. I saw somebody else also agreed, lots of reading to do, lots of information to check out. It's very motivating, I think, personally. So I hope everyone else found it to be that as well. So
Thank you, everybody.
thank
Thank
you.
everyone. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.